Hello. The topic for today is journaling. Journaling as a tool for stress management. And it turns out that journaling is an excellent tool when it comes to managing our stress. There's a lot of research, evidence in support of it. And that's what we will be talking about today. The various forms of journaling, and if you adopt journaling as a practice, then what would be some of the approaches that you could take? Those are the kind of details that we will be covering in this talk. So, you are familiar with this diagram because I have shared this in several of my other presentations. And this diagram essentially emphasizes the fact that our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are intricately linked with each other. The way we think, it affects the way we feel, and it also affects our behavior. Similarly, the way we feel impacts our thoughts, the nature of our thoughts. Our emotions also affect our behavior, right? And the way we behave affects our thoughts and emotions. So they all tend to affect each other. We already know this. We already know that managing emotions directly, which is, stress is a form of emotion, we could treat it that way, is a little difficult. It's difficult to say, oh, don't worry, things will become all right. But then issue is, how do I not worry? It's easy for you to say not to worry, but I can't help it. I just worry, right? We have discussed this. So one of the ways that we try to manage then is through changing our thoughts and or changing our behaviors. So if we start thinking in the right way or in positive ways, then it will start impacting our emotions. So we may start feeling positive. We may start not worrying as much. Or if we start engaging in certain behaviors in form of, let's say, working on the task that we are working, or engaging in physical activities, or engaging in yoga, those things then start affecting our emotions in positive ways too, right? So these thoughts, emotions, behaviors, they are intricately connected with each other. We know this. And this was also the premise for me to introduce the topic of meditation, because in the present day, our life is rarely in danger as such. So most of our stress is actually caused by our thoughts. Now, it's not real physical danger that we have, that we need to respond in form of fight or flight. Most of our stress is because of our thoughts. Thoughts about we may be not doing so well in the future. Thoughts about we may be losing our partner. Thoughts about the economy tanking and then that affecting our life, and so on and so forth. Now, some of these thoughts may be valid thoughts, but they still affect our emotions, right? So meditation was a process through which we started taking greater control of our thoughts. And of course, we have discussed the process through which it happens. So we don't let the emotional part of our brain overpower the conscious part of our brain. So that was what meditation is. But meditation is often a process that many people find it difficult to engage in, because it's at least in the beginning stages, it requires a lot of effort to sit quietly and meditate. And especially if you haven't had any training in meditation by somebody who is actually trained and an expert in meditation, then meditation can be a little overwhelming. It can be very frustrating, in fact. Although the frustration is part of the process and one should welcome it. The way we go to the gym to work on our exercise and our physical body exercises. And if we have been inactive for a long time, then when we go to the gym and start working out, or when we are running, it's going to be an extremely painful process, right? So similarly, meditation will be an extremely painful process in the beginning. So if you persist, of course, things becomes easier, and after a point of time, you can actually get into those blissful states through meditation. So meditation is excellent, no doubt about it. But what if you do not have that discipline to go through meditation? How do you deal with your stress then? One option, of course, is to focus on your behaviors. But again, can you do other things apart from changing your behaviors to impact your emotions? So in terms of, can you do things at your thought level to impact your emotions? That's the question. And journaling turns out to be one of the easy things that you can do that will impact your emotions in very positive ways. So let's take an example. Let's say you are working on a task that has been given by, say, your professor or your boss, or it could be a task that you have chosen on your own, self-chosen task. And let's say it's taking a lot of time for you to complete it, to do a good job of it. It's taking time and effort, too much of time. So that then may make you wonder, why is this so difficult for me, right? Because you were expecting that it should not take as much time, but it is taking time. So why is it being so difficult? Why is this task being so difficult? That's what you will wonder. And that then may lead to this thought, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought. That's the reason. Maybe I'm not as intelligent. That's the reason it's taking me so much of time to complete this task, right? And that could lead to the thought that, if I'm not as intelligent, then maybe I will not be able to fulfill my career dreams. All these big dreams that I had about becoming a leader or whatever my specific career goals are. So I may start questioning my ability to fulfill my dreams, my ambitions. And what will happen then? I will be depressed. So you see the progression of thoughts. So this emotion of feeling depressed, didn't come out of the blue, even though feeling blue is often described as emotion of depression, right? But my point is, this experience of depression, it came from our thoughts, from certain negative or irrational thoughts. So if we change our thoughts, if we change our thought patterns, there's a lot of irrationality in this thought pattern here. Yes, so let's analyze these thoughts. This is taking too long to complete. Well, what is too long? Maybe it is, let's even accept the fact that it is taking too long. Normal than average, probably. Okay, so more than average time that people take to complete a task. So yes, it is being difficult. So compared to the average time that people take, maybe it is taking you more time to complete this task. Now, does that automatically mean that you are not smart? Not necessarily. Maybe you haven't had the training in this particular task. Maybe you had the training, but you haven't invested yourself into that task enough. Maybe you are too distracted. So even if you are working for like 5 hours, but while working on that task for 5 hours, you are constantly distracted. You are checking your emails, your Instagram messages, and what else. Maybe in between you are talking to some friend. Or even if you are not, let's say, distracted by these external things, maybe you are distracted internally, right? So maybe you are not 100% there on your task. Maybe you mentally you are getting distracted. You start thinking about something else. You start daydreaming while working on this task. So of course, then it is taking you longer for you to complete this task. It need not be about your intelligence. Well, even if it is about your intelligence, intelligence, there is this idea of that was talked about by Carol Dweck, who is a professor at Stanford now. She was earlier at Columbia. So she talks about two different types of mindsets. One is the fixed mindset. So whatever abilities we talk about, they're fixed. We can't change it in a significant way. And the other is the growth mindset. So our abilities can be changed if we put effort. If we work hard on it, we can actually change our abilities. So you not being smart, maybe it's just a factor in the present. But if you work hard, if you consistently work on in that particular area, your abilities in that area can increase significantly over a period of time. And you may actually become an expert in that subject if you are willing to invest time and effort into that particular topic, right? So not being smart in the present or not being as intelligent in the present also does not automatically mean that you will not be able to fulfill your dreams, your academic or your career related dreams. In other words, what you see here is I am critiquing the thought pattern that is actually going on in somebody's mind, in the hypothetical mind. Let's say it's happening in your mind or my mind. So if I start thinking rationally, I will not turn out to be as depressed. In fact, this is the basis of what is called cognitive therapy. In cognitive therapy, Albert Ellis and or Aaron Ellis, yeah, I think Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck, yeah, those were the two guys in the 60s or 70s. They essentially came up with this idea of our emotions impacting. Most of the thought pattern until that point of time was our emotions impacting our thoughts. Okay, that's what the majority in the psychology discipline believed. But they emphasized that our thoughts impact our emotions in a bigger way than our emotions impacting thoughts. So if we want to cure depression, then we have to fix our thoughts, because our thoughts impact our emotions in a significant way. Because it is true that people who are depressed, they tend to have a lot of gloomy thoughts. But is it the gloomy thoughts that are impacting the depressive feelings, or is it that the depressive feelings are impacting the gloomy thoughts? What is? And they argued that it's those thoughts, the way you think, that is impacting your emotions more than your emotions impacting your thoughts. So based on that premise, they then came up with this idea of cognitive therapy or rational emotive therapy. So there are many terms now. So they focused on questioning your thinking pattern. So we may actually be having a lot of irrational thoughts in our mind, which then is making us feel depressed or anxious or stressed. In fact, in my entire semester, I have emphasized so much on how you define stress, how stress is not automatic, how stress is something that you experience when your abilities or your capacity, the present capacity, is lower than what the challenge that you have in front of you, right? When there is that mismatch. So why did I emphasize these models so much? Because I wanted to change your thought pattern about what stress is and how, and if you change your thinking about what stress is, you will actually not feel as helpless, and you will actually not feel as anxious or as depressed. Okay, so that's the reason I have given so much of emphasis on that. So coming back to the specifics of, those were of course broad mental models that I wanted to create in your mind. So that's the reason I have been emphasizing so much on what stress is and how stress is experienced and how not all stress is bad, all that stuff. But when it comes to specifics, like this can be a specific example of, how a particular task that you're finding difficult, ultimately makes you feel very depressed. And then when you start feeling depressed because you're feeling low, you may not put the kind of effort that would be needed for you to actually do well on the task. You may instead start going to, the bar and start drinking, or start munching on something unhealthy, and so on and so forth, which then leads to a vicious cycle, right? So what we have to try to do is to break this cycle. We need to change our thought patterns. So, but how do we do that? So let's say the same example, a task is taking too long to complete, and why is this so difficult for me? That's the question that you're asking. So maybe this assignment needs a lot of practice. So here I'm not questioning automatically my lack of ability, or my ability or lack thereof. Rather, I am questioning whether I have practiced enough on this task. So then you may come to the decision that, hey, I need to devote more time to succeed on this task. And then you are actually now feeling determined as opposed to feeling depressed. So you see how your thought patterns can change the way you feel. So if you are working under a cognitive behavior therapist, your therapist essentially will analyze your thinking pattern this way and will help you identify many of the irrational thought patterns that you may be having, and will teach you to replace those negative thoughts with positive thoughts. And by the way, it is not so much negative versus positive, but rather irrational versus rational thoughts. Okay, and that's how then you get rid of your depression. So we have a lot of these negative thoughts. Automatic negative thoughts is what it is often referred to as. I would probably call them automatic irrational thoughts, but they are all self-referential thoughts. One thing that you will notice here: I can't do it. I am not worthy. I must be perfect. I must not make a mistake. I am not good enough. Nobody loves me. It's all about me, I. And you will remember this from my discussion on meditation, how this self-referential thinking leads to greater problems, leads to more depression, leads to more anxiety, and how then meditation helps. When you meditate, it actually decreases your self-referential thinking. So meditation helps a lot here as well. But as I said, if you cannot meditate for whatever reason, if you don't necessarily have developed the discipline yet, then how can you still manage your thoughts? Okay, so we need to fix the way we think, and it turns out, before I proceed to how we do it through journaling, we need to also talk about negativity bias. So a positive thought and a negative thought, they are not equally weighted. A negative thought is much more powerful than a positive thought. And I have discussed this also in my relationship video on managing stress in relationships, right? You already know about this. But because of evolutionary reasons, many of these negative thoughts, they gave us some evolutionary advantage to survive in threatening situations. So our brain is attuned to give more weight to negative thoughts. But then these negative thoughts then can make us extremely depressed, right? Or extremely anxious. So how do we fix our strong negativity bias, especially when it is actually harming us as opposed to helping us be more successful, be more happy in our lives? So journaling turns out to be a very effective technique. It helps you examine your life. The quote that one of the quotes that I love is by Socrates. He says that an unexamined life is not worth living. And the previous slide, automatic negative thoughts. Many of our thoughts are actually automatic. We do not actually examine our thoughts thoroughly. And that's the reason they have this kind of negative effect on our lives, right? So if we actually had thoroughly examined our thought pattern, then we wouldn't be as depressed. We wouldn't be as anxious. We wouldn't be as frustrated in our lives. We wouldn't feel as helpless in our lives. So it is extremely important that we examine our thoughts, our thinking pattern, our beliefs. We make a lot of assumptions about a lot of things, and that is the root of a lot of our problems in life. Socrates, as he was the philosopher who had to drink poison, and all his disciples, they said that, hey, you can escape. There is time for you to escape. But he was a calm, composed man. He did an analysis, thorough analysis of what would be the benefits and repercussions of taking up that responsibility and not escaping. He was already into his late 60s, I think. He then analyzes, if I escape, well, yeah, probably we'll live for another 10 years and will die somewhere. Ultimately, I'm getting very old anyway. But I will not be happy because I didn't stand up for something that I have been emphasizing my entire life, about the importance of critical thinking, about the importance of free speech and all that stuff. So he took up the responsibility to own up and not blame anyone for this outcome. He happily embraced the idea of not the idea, but actually taking the poison and killing himself when he was imposed this punishment that he has to drink poison. So when you examine your thoughts well, you will be able to take some extremely courageous decisions in your life, which you otherwise would not have been able to. That's essentially what I'm trying to emphasize here. So it is extremely important that we examine our lives. This also takes me to another quote by Confucius, who was an ancient Chinese philosopher. He says, by three methods we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is the noblest. Second, by imitation, which is the easiest. And third, by experience, which is the bitterest. It's such wise words. So often we actually make mistakes in life and learn things the hard way, and that is part of life too. So no issues there. I have talked about it and I have written about it, about how we can learn a lot, how we can master our life by imitating good role models, by associating ourselves with people who are really good in whatever area that they are in. And we learn a lot by observing them, by imitating them, by following them. And that's how you actually become great. That's one of the easiest ways to become great. But Confucius also talks about reflection, which is in a way thinking about your actions, about your thoughts. So you are deeply reflecting, which is what examining life is about, examining one's thoughts is about. That's another way that you can change your life in profound ways. And while experience has its place, but it is a very bitter, very difficult path, right? Imitation again is an extremely great way to imitating the great role models, ideals. But you may not have access to great ideals in your life right now. That's what you should seek. So you should try to seek mentors. You should try to associate with friends who can or who are as passionate about success, about happiness, who are better than you. So those things are good. But what if you're in your current circumstances you do not have access to that? You still can make some extremely positive changes by engaging in this reflection process. And that's the reason, in fact, in this class I have given you so much of those reflection questions that you engaged in the discussion forums. So that essentially brings us to journaling. Okay, so what is journaling? In journaling, you are essentially writing down your thoughts, your feelings, your memories, your perceptions or views about different things in life. So the word journal comes from the French word journey, which means from sunrise to sunset. So you are documenting what's happening from the time that you wake up to the time that you go to sleep. Although you can even journal about your dreams after you wake up. Okay, so it need not strictly journaling need not be about only what happens or what we go through from our waking up till going to bed. So what happens when we are writing down? Writing down, it turns out to be an excellent way to bring clarity to our thinking. Most of us, we think we are really good at thinking. We have great thinking abilities, but even the experts aren't as good in their thinking as they may imagine themselves to be. Most of us are very lousy thinkers. We don't critically analyze many of our thoughts. We actually fall into this automatic thought pattern, and many a times those automatic thought patterns turn out to be negative thoughts, right? So journaling becomes a great way to actually enhance your critical thinking abilities. It can be a great tool for even enhancing your creative thinking abilities. But at a fundamental level, it brings more clarity to the way you think about important things in your life. That is something that is cool about writing. So because when we are only thinking about something, there are so many thoughts that are in our mind. It becomes very difficult to organize them. We often don't make the kind of connections that are needed to, or we often find it difficult to question certain thoughts because it's all jumbled up in our brain, at our thought. When we start writing those thoughts, we start gaining clarity. In fact, in a college education, I think, unfortunately, writing isn't emphasized as much as it should be. But that's the benefit of college education, where you learn how to write. And not just learn how to write, but learn the importance of writing. Writing can be a great tool to dramatically change your life. So there are a lot of benefits of journaling. We will go to the specifics now. I'll give you some tips and techniques of journaling. So let's get into the benefits of journaling. So journaling in a way can be called, it's almost like meditation in a way. If you do it correctly, we could call it like writing meditation. Some people have actually used that term. Though technically meditation and journaling are different. But in terms of benefits, you do see some benefits in journaling similar to what has been observed in meditation. Okay, so let's say you are going through some emotional turmoil. When you start writing things down, it can be a form of catharsis where you are releasing these strong repressed emotions. You are expressing those emotions. Now when it comes to expression of emotions, there are so just going physically and bashing things up, that is actually detrimental. It makes you even more angry. But here you are releasing those emotions. So you are not repressing it anymore, but you are releasing it in a way that gives you greater insights about those emotions. you are accepting them, accepting the emotions, right? So it can give you a great sense of relief when you start journaling, especially if you have been going through a lot of difficulties. And these are from studies, from Pennebaker 2013 paper. And there are other studies, one showing that it increases your self-awareness. And we know how self-awareness is important to manage stress. And how does it increase self-awareness? You now gain greater clarity about your thoughts, because you are, as you're writing about the events in your life, or the emotions that you're feeling, you start questioning, okay, why am I feeling this way? So through that process, you gain greater clarity. And when you have greater clarity, when you recognize some of those dysfunctional and irrational thought patterns that you are having, once you recognize them, they lose their potency, right? And they cease to affect you as much, and you start feeling better. So these positive awareness turns out to be a great impact, especially for relieving the kind of stress that we. So this is from another paper, 2002 paper, and this is a direct quote. The participants, they developed greater awareness of the positive benefits of stressful event than the other two groups that were just writing general stuff, not actually journaling. This effect was apparently mediated by greater cognitive processing during writing. So when you're writing, as I was mentioning, there's a lot of intellectual mental processing that happens, which doesn't happen when you're only thinking about something. As I said, because we are lousy thinkers, but when we write things become much more organized. So there's a much streamlined processing of all these thoughts that happens, which leads us to gain greater insights. And you actually start even realizing what they find, that you start realizing the benefits of benefits of stressful events. You don't necessarily then shun away from stress. Rather, you may even embrace it, because hey, it can help in your growth. So Watkins' paper talks about how it can help remove some of these destructive, repetitive thought patterns that people may have. Other studies have shown that they increase the sense of self-responsibility. So you start taking ownership of your feelings as opposed to blaming the world, okay, which is taking self-responsibility, having that internal sense of control, internal locus of control, that we know is essential for success and happiness, right? We have seen that in other studies. Journaling has also been found to resolve many of the unresolved things in our life. When some breakup may have happened with and you may be ruminating over it for a long period of time. But when you start journaling again in the systematic manner, then many of those unresolved thoughts and emotions can actually get resolved. Okay. So you may that way actually get potential closure to many of these problems that you may be experiencing. You may start making sense of a lot of the problems that you are having, and you may derive meaning from those stressful events. And these are from different studies that I'm quoting. Now let's take some more specific benefits that come from journaling. Pennebaker is one of the pioneers who studied a lot on the benefits of journaling. So in one of the studies, they find that participants who were journaling, so they had different groups. One group was asked to journal like you do what I have been talking about, reflecting on one's thoughts, questioning those thoughts, and they followed a systematic pattern of journaling. And the control group, they were also writing, but they were writing about unrelated stuff. Okay, they were not necessarily reflecting and on their lives and their decisions and so on and so forth, and their emotions. And what they find is that the group that was journaling, they had much fewer physician visits. They actually started becoming more healthy. Now, initially though, journaling, and these groups, they were, after this, all these patients, they had some traumatic experience, and they were journaling about 15 minutes on 4 consecutive days. So only 4 consecutive days of journaling had this positive effect of their physician visits decreasing. So they were actually less ill. Though initially, because when you are journaling, you are bringing in many of these repressed emotions to the fore. So they had unpleasant dreams, and it was initially they were even very tearful, crying, because they were bringing these emotions to the fore. But follow-up studies with the same participants showed that they had few illnesses. So consequently, they didn't have to make as many visits to the physician. So you can see how powerful journaling can be. Then there are other studies, many other studies, where they have found how journaling decreases blood pressure. So it decreases hypertension. It decreases even bad cholesterol levels. People suffering from fibromyalgia, they had greater control over the pain, so they suffered less. Studies have shown how journaling has actually increased the T helper cells, which help you fight with infections. So it increased your immunity. It lowered cortisol levels. As I was already mentioning, there are studies showing how it increases your self-efficacy, the confidence that you can actually do these different tasks that you're working on. It increases your internal locus of control. It reduces workplace stress. It increases your job satisfaction. And because it decreases your workplace stress, you are not going to be as frequently absent on your job. Studies have also been done on the benefits of journaling on people grieving after some romantic breakup. It has shown to be helpful there as well. So a lot of these studies you can see concrete evidence of journaling actually helping. And here's another paper. It's something I took a snapshot from the original paper. So it was actually by Pennebaker and Chung 2007 paper. And there they talk about the original expressive writing meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is a statistical technique that takes the summary of findings from multiple studies. Okay, so it's not just one study, but multiple studies that have been done on any particular topic. They find the overall effect size across these many studies. So one of the meta-analytic studies that was published in 1998, that's what they are talking about. It is interesting. In that study, the conclusions were that the writing, so journaling, is associated with positive outcomes with a weighted mean effect size of D equals 0.47. So for those who don't know effect size, so let's say this black color part of the graph that you're seeing, this bell-shaped curve, let's say that's the before they engaged in this writing workshop, or we can also think in terms of that's the control group. But the blue group is the blue curve. So that's the curve of the group that is, or that got to do journaling. So we do see that there is an improvement here, right? Of course, it's no technique is perfect that that the means will become here. So, or at least not in the short trainings. But even in these journaling, they do see changes, and the effect size of 0.47 is actually considered a fairly large, moderately large, medium. It's actually very uncommon in social sciences to see such effect sizes. So pretty big effect size. And the highest significant effect sizes were for psychological and physiological outcomes. Physiological means your actual health parameter outcomes. You can see D value of 0.66, 0.68, they are considered fairly large. So again, those who know statistics will be able to appreciate these effect sizes. But my point is, not only does journaling have positive effect, but those effect sizes are also pretty significant, pretty big. So it can actually help reduce your stress, or this rather distress, the negative aspect of stress, in a significant way. There are a whole host of other benefits and that have been talked by many people. Self-awareness, self-improvement, clarity in thinking, stress relief, and so on and so forth. Enhancing friendship and increase your memory and whole host of things. But I think I have already gone through some of the most important ones in the previous slides. So let's take a few examples of some famous meditations. So probably one of the most famous ones, and the one that I love the most, is the book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus Aurelius was actually a Stoic philosopher. Well, he was an emperor, and so he used to journal on a daily basis. So whatever thoughts that used to come in his mind, he would journal them. He would just write them, and most of those thoughts were about life and how he can be much more effective in life. And those thoughts have been then put together in these books called Meditations. There are many translations, of course, so that's the reason I'm saying books, but it is the original one is a series of these his thoughts, and they are little unrelated to each other, so they don't necessarily follow a strict book format, because they are like daily journaling, right? But he was one of the greatest emperors primarily because of his journaling. In fact, I would strongly recommend all of you to read this book, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And these are some of those quotes from the book. But then, when you read the original book, you will get the context and you will be able to appreciate that wisdom a lot more. There are many other examples. Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh. She was actually homeless, and how this journaling, where he imagines having conversation with God and writes all those thoughts. Through that process, actually, he ultimately got out of journaling and became a best-selling author. The book Color Purple, which was also made into a huge Hollywood movie, was actually a journal. Probably one of the most famous journals was by Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl, right? And this reminds me, of course, I had read this book long ago, but I still distinctly remember how this young pre-adolescent girl had such great insights about life. How she could take the challenge and of living under the Nazi regime in this hiding, and how she could cope with all those challenges really well. I would attribute a lot of it to her journaling. Otherwise, maybe it would have been much more difficult for her. Of course, we know that she ultimately did survive because they got caught and was sent to the concentration camp. But this journaling gave her the kind of insights that most adults don't have in their 30s, 40s, even 50s, 60s, right? So I think this is a great example of how beneficial journaling can be. If it can help a young girl, it can help us adults in even more significant ways. So what do we need to journaling? To do journaling, we don't need much, right? We just need a notebook, some pen or pencil, some writing utensil, and a quiet environment. Or even if there is noise, it's okay. But preferably if you have a quiet environment, or an environment where you're not disturbed, where you can focus your thoughts completely on what you need to write, and that's all you do. You then start writing. I would recommend, though, when you start journaling, try to journal, sit in the same place, same time, preferably again. Because that helps you get into the mood of journaling easier. And you could journal just for 5 minutes a day to 30 minutes a day, or maybe longer if that is what is needed at that point of time. Because of maybe some major stress that you may be going through in life, you could even journal longer. But and you could do it daily, which is what I would recommend. Or once you have mastered it well, maybe you don't have to do it daily. Though I would not necessarily recommend that. Same with meditation, right? Because it helps you sustain that ability for a much longer period. But sometimes we all falter. I do practice meditation regularly, but there are times that I don't. and but then I come back to it. I especially then come back to it when there is a need for it, and then I try to sustain it. So same thing with respect to journaling. I do journal regularly as well, and I was a big proponent of the handwritten journal before, because there is something about writing by hand that has much greater impact than just typing things away. But of late, actually, oh yeah, for quite some time now, I have been using electronic versions of journaling. In fact, the app that I use, or yeah, it's called Day One. It's a free app. There is a paid version too, where you have to. It's not a one-time payment, but you subscribe to it and you pay monthly or annually. I have the free version. So free version allows you for only maintaining one journal. So you cannot maintain 2 3 journals, but one journal is maybe you can have different journals for different areas of your life maybe, but one journal is good enough for me, and it's a free app that allows me to, and it's available on the Mac and Windows and iOS versions. So you can even type things online. So that's what I use. Electronically, like many like iPads and many of these different tablets, you can actually write, physically write also on the tablet, right? Those options are also available, and there are many apps that allow you to do that. Many note-taking apps that allow you to do that. Though I have in the past mostly done pen pencil kind of draft, and then the electronic typing. So I used to use the OneNote, which is the Windows app. So I used to use that for my journaling. But quite recently, I found this Day One journaling app, which is something amazing, which makes it very easy. Occasionally, I do use my iPad note-taking app, and I have another tablet also that I use to write things down. But currently, this is my major way that I journal. So it's important that when you're journaling to keep few things in mind. Confidentiality is a big part. When, especially if you are maintaining a physical journal with pen and paper, you are sharing many of your most intimate thoughts there. You are questioning some of your intimate thoughts there. So it is important that it is not easily accessed by anyone, right? So that the confidentiality of those thoughts are maintained. So it needs to be in a secure location where not anyone can easily get one's hand on those on that journal. Sometimes when that happens, it could lead to even breakdown of relationships, right? Oh, that's what you were thinking about me. So especially from that perspective, the electronic journals, they tend to work better, because you can just protect them using passwords. But when you are writing, when you are journaling, it's important that you do it, or it helps if you are doing it in a relaxed state. So that's the reason I think early morning journaling, like early morning meditation, helps a lot. You could try different techniques of journaling, and I will talk about some of those techniques. But the importance of quietness and having the privacy is important. And when you're journaling, let your thoughts flow. Don't have to be too particular about grammar and those issues, because remember, here it is not about developing your writing skills or finishing your grammar when it comes to writing, but getting greater clarity to your thoughts, right? So that's the objective here. And there are many techniques to journaling. We will go through some of these. The first one that we'll go through is the Busan style, which is nothing but the mind maps. Mind maps are a great tool to actually start making sense of things that we otherwise find difficult to make sense of. I think some of the best examples of mind maps we see in the detective movies, right? Murder mysteries, where the detective will put these different images and timeline, and their wall will be completely filled with these images. And why do they do that? it's to start making connections, seemingly unrelated events, and how can they then make sense of all that unrelated information, and that's how then they succeed in solving these murder mysteries, right? So here you are not solving murder mysteries, but the mysteries of life, mysteries, the challenges that you are facing in life. So that's essentially what mind map is, and we are, from a biological evolutionary perspective, we are very visual creatures. We are not. Language developed something much later in the evolutionary scheme of things, much later. But most of our navigation of our life we did by seeing the cues in the environment, and so that's the reason mind maps can be extremely helpful too, because you are creating a mental picture of your thoughts, which can be very helpful. So for that, of course, typing things down will not be as helpful, for which then pen and pencil will make a big difference. But then there are mind map apps as well. Here are some examples of mind maps, and you could essentially do mind maps of your daily life. If you're currently feeling stressed, so what are maybe these areas that you're feeling? Maybe school is causing you stress, coming close to the finals week, this English essay is due, maybe you're having some relationship problems, he or she, your partner does make me happy most of the time, but right now I'm very unhappy. Should I end this relationship? Or maybe you could list down, yes, for some reasons why you should end the relationship, why you not, and so on and so forth. I mean, this is not a. You could then think of possible solutions to your problems. Let's say you're heavily stressed at work, juggling between work and school. So you are creating these mental pictures, and that's one way of journaling. Okay. Another way of journaling is dialogue writing. So you essentially imagine having a conversation with somebody. So you write it in a form like you are conversing with somebody. One of the most common forms of doing this is having a conversation with God. So that's one of the ways. So you write as if you are talking to God. Okay, so that's one of the way. But it could be with anybody for that matter. It could be with your mentor. You are not necessarily sharing this with your mentor or with your boyfriend or girlfriend or wife or whatever, but you write your thoughts as if you are having a conversation, because different people have different strengths when it comes to communicating. Sometimes writing in this communication dialogue form of becomes easier for people to write things this way as opposed to writing in general essay kind of format. So you could use this dialogue writing form. One of the things that I would strongly recommend, especially when you're trying to improve, get into this habit of journaling, is timed writings. In fact, the app that I mentioned, Day One, it has these journaling templates: 5-minute morning 5-minute journaling, and evening 5-minute journaling, and so on and so forth. I will share those with you. But you put a timer, maybe for 5 minutes, maybe for 10 minutes, and during that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is the timer that you put, you don't get distracted. You just focus and write down your thoughts. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to spend hours together when it comes to journaling. You do it daily, and you do it in a focused manner. And if you still have thoughts after the timer has run out, yeah, that's fine. You can write more, but at least for that 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you do your journaling, whatever timer that you have set. So that's another technique that's used. So the unsent letters is another technique. This is similar to a conversation that you are having with somebody, but you write it in form of a letter. You don't necessarily send the letter to this person, but so again, you are having. A conversation is a two-way kind of thing, right? Dialogue is two-way. Unsent letter is one-way kind of conversation. So you are writing a letter to somebody, but not necessarily sending it. So you are not necessarily getting feedback from the other person. Malcolm Bradbury's one of his famous novels is called Unsent Letters. I haven't read it, frankly, but information about, probably that's the premise based on which this book was based. So another thing that is coming very common these days is maintaining an online diary. So people have websites and blogs or video blogs or vlogging as they call it, where so they do the journaling, but publicly, either in form of a blog or a video blog. So they do daily journaling, and I think it has some benefits, but especially when it comes to the purpose of stress management, especially when it comes to our personal growth, I wouldn't recommend this approach. Yes, let's say you're traveling and you're maintaining a journal and you want to share those experiences with the public, and or you want to develop a business or whatever. In those circumstances, things may work out well, but journaling has to be private. I think that is very important, which again I have already emphasized, right? When you make things public, you are writing for an audience. So the nature of your writing changes. Okay, it need not be as authentic anymore, because you are writing to an audience. So you are trying to impress some people. So that then will not help you gain the kind of insights that you want to gain. So this blogging, blogging, these are things that I would not recommend for personal journaling. So let's take a few examples of those templates that I was talking about, that app Day One has. So 5-minute aim, this is one of the templates that they have. So you just put a timer for 5 minutes. You write, what am I grateful for this morning? So wake up and start typing down things. What would make today great? So those are some of the thoughts that you write. Daily affirmation. Similarly, in the night, you may do a 5-minute journaling. 3 things that happened today. 1, 2, 3. Some big things that happened today. What could I have made today better? Some insights that you have gained. You write. So these templates, excuse me, these can be easy tools to start journaling, especially if you haven't had the habit of journaling. If you have never done this, these are very focused cues that help you start journaling. And gratitude, it turns out to be a great way to start feeling better about life, because yes, there are a lot of bad things happening in our life, but there's a lot of positive things happening in our life too, right? And we often don't give as much importance to that. Why? Because of negativity bias, because negative things tend to occupy our mental space too much. We may be having a lot of positive things, but we don't give importance to it, and we give our attention gets focused on the negative things. That's the reason we feel unhappy, stressed, anxious, depressed, right? All that stuff. So gratitude. So there is actually a form of meditation called it's the original term is metta meditation. It's called compassion meditation, or gratitude meditation. So essentially, that's what you're doing here. You are doing gratitude meditation in a written form. Okay, excuse me. So I am personally not a hugely in favor of this 5-minute 5-minute timer kind of stuff, though initially it can be very beneficial. Now, why I'm not in favor of this only 5-minute? Because sometimes 5 minutes can be enough, but it is important to feel those emotions. So it's not just about making a list of all the things that I'm grateful for today, but when you write the thing that you're grateful for today, it is important to feel those emotions, right? And that's when it has a greater, stronger, deeper impact on you. So instead of just writing it in form of bullet point, yes, you can write it in form of a bullet point. But if I elaborate on it a little bit more, why I feel grateful, or even if I don't want to elaborate, if I feel incompetent to elaborate, if I at least spend 30 seconds experiencing that feeling of gratitude, then we start having much deeper kind of impact, right? So, but otherwise, these 5-minute cues can be great. They also have these daily plans. What are the things that I want to accomplish? My priorities for today. What are the tasks that I need to complete? And you can check, mark them if you completed all that stuff. Day summary. Any notable things that happened today? what I have been thinking about, what next, and so they have many of these journaling uh, templates. And you can modify these templates as well. And in fact, what I do myself is I have modified. I have created a template of my own, which is modification of some of these. Some of these things I don't like. Any notable things that happened today. Happened today. 3 things that happened to me today. These are not necessarily the best templates. Why? Because it's external locus of control, things that are happening to me. Well, that's true, there are things that are happening to me, but we want to develop that internal locus of control, right? So many of these things I am not necessarily a huge fan of, but so I will share what I do and what I would recommend that you do. So yes, in the morning, when I journal, gratitude, that's a big component. So what do I feel grateful for today? When I'm so wake up, drink my coffee, well, coffee actually later, but my tea, and so I just start typing things down. So gratitude, my daily goals, what is it that I want to accomplish today, and any other thoughts that come to my mind, miscellaneous thoughts. Those are the 3 broad headings that I cover in the morning. In the evening, or in the later in the night, I try to get a list of what are the things that I accomplished today. Okay, we do not necessarily feel, especially if you are a very ambitious person, this type A kind of personality, we often do not give ourselves enough credit for the things that we accomplish. But only when you gain that sense of accomplishment will you get the energy, the motivational energy to accomplish more, right? So when you list out all the accomplishments, what are the things that you accomplished today, your self-efficacy increases, and this accomplishment list is related to the daily goals. So some of the things that I may have accomplished may be unrelated to the things that I had set as goals for today, but at least majority should be related to the goals. So it should not be probably an accomplishment that happened by fluke. So I had aimed to let's say complete writing 1,000 words today, so I may not have accomplished that, but I accomplished something else. Say I don't know. Yeah, say creating this video. Well, if I'm creating a video that will go into my goals, but something else. Let's say I felt like recording a song today in the evening, and I did that. I sense a sense of accomplishment. Well, that's an accomplishment, but we have to make sure that we are especially making sufficient effort to accomplish what we set out to during the day. So what are the things that we set out to do? So I list those. What are the accomplishments of today that I can feel proud about? And I may or may not accomplish everything, right? So what are the lessons that I learned? I may have failed somewhere, I may have succeeded somewhere. And again, many of these lessons need not be about what I set out to do and what I succeeded or failed to accomplish. It could be about other areas of life too. It could be also about things that happened to me. Maybe somebody mistreated me. How did I respond there? Could I have done things better? Could I have handled the situation in a slightly better way, so that I would not be feeling as helpless as I did at that point of time? Or even if I didn't feel helpless, maybe I succeeded, but it gives me an opportunity to reflect on how my actions, my words made the other person feel. Could I have done things differently that will make me much more effective the next time around? So any of those things. So you reflect upon your day and you write about these lessons. What did you learn today? I also maintain, I do a gratitude list again in the evening, because gratitude matters a lot. So things during the day for which I'm grateful for, and the goals part I again do in the night before going to bed. So I start thinking about my goals the night before, essentially, right? I may list the same goals again, or make some certain modifications in the next day morning when I write down those goals. But when you start writing about your goals in the night, your brain essentially starts preparing you for the next day. So when you wake up, you are ready to take on life. So you are much more motivated, right? So you are not trying to figuring things out completely from scratch when you wake up, right? So And again, when we are talking about goals, we are talking about goals that are important to you, that gives you a sense of purpose, that gives you a sense of meaning, not just the things that you have to do because it's a job, it's a role. Those things could take into you could take those things into account as well. But anyway, this is the broad framework of journaling that I do, and I would recommend that you do as well. So that's all that I had about journaling. We will stop the video here. Thank you.